Double the offer, Robert. I've got lunch at 1. This is just a 10-second problem.
I have been sitting on this bench for over 20 years. I have seen cold-blooded killers, professional con artists, and the most brutal gangs. But nothing, I repeat, nothing makes my blood boil more than seeing a rich person who believes their bank account allows them to trample on the dignity of others. If you think justice in America is only for the rich, watch this video to the end, because what happened in my courtroom last Tuesday will change your mind forever. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button because you need to witness the moment that arrogant smirk gets wiped off his face. Case file number 992, CV lies right in front of me. The defendant is Julian Thorne, 29 years old, CEO and founder of the tech giant Apex Horizon, a company valued at billions. When Julian walked into my courtroom, he didn't walk like a man facing the law. He walked like he was entering a press conference where he was the star. He wore a custom-tailored Tom Ford suit. I'd guess it cost no less than $10,000. On his wrist was a Richard Mille limited edition, a luxury toy worth $500,000. But what caught my attention wasn't what he was wearing, but his attitude. He walked in, glued to his phone, not even bothering to look up when the bailiff shouted, "All rise." He sat in the defendant's chair, crossed his legs, and sighed with boredom, as if being here was an insult to his precious time. Sitting opposite him was the victim, Mr. Elias Vance. Elias is 62 years old, a man with white hair and the calloused hands of a lifetime of labor. Elias has been a security guard at Apex Tower for the last 15 years. He wore a uniform that was old but pressed flat and clean. On his forehead, right above his left eyebrow, was a 2-inch stitch, still raw and red, the mark of his interaction with the young CEO. Elias sat there, eyes looking down at the floor, hands clasped tight. I could see the trembling in his thin shoulders. That wasn't just fear, that was humiliation. The humiliation of a man who has lived a life obeying the law, working hard to feed his family, only to be trampled by someone young enough to be his grandson. The incident occurred on the morning of September 5th. According to police reports and security camera footage, Julian Thorne arrived at headquarters at 9:15 a.m. That day, the building's security system had just been upgraded. New rules required everyone, including executives, to swipe a new key card through the security gate to activate the elevators. Elias Vance was simply doing his job. When Julian breezed past the gate without swiping, Elias stepped out to block the way. He spoke very politely. "Mr. Thorne, the new system requires you to swipe so I can open the elevator for you." "Sir." Julian Thorne's reaction? He didn't stop. He didn't even look at Elias. He just waved his hand to shoo Elias away and kept walking. Elias, responsible for the building's security, stood firm in front of the elevator doors. "Sir, I'm sorry, but I cannot let you up without a system log. This is the new safety protocol." That was when Julian Thorne exploded. He took off his expensive sunglasses, stared at the old guard, and screamed, "Do you know who I am? I own this building. I pay your salary. You dare block my path?" But what happened next is what makes this case truly grave. In his hand, Julian was holding a solid metal tablet. In a fit of rage, while Elias still refused to open the door, Julian swung his arm. He used that tablet to smash the face of Mr. Elias. The blow was so hard that Elias fell backward, his head hitting the edge of the reception desk. Blood poured down the 62-year-old's face. Julian Thorne didn't stop to help. He stepped over Elias's body as he lay writhing in pain on the floor, reached over to swipe Elias's card himself to open the elevator, and went up to his office, leaving the old guard unconscious in a pool of blood. Now, here in my courtroom, Julian Thorne maintains that exact same attitude. His lawyer, a man named Robert Sterling, known as a shark for the ultra-rich, stood up. "Your Honor," Sterling said with a smooth voice, "my client wishes to apologize for this unfortunate misunderstanding. We believe this was just a minor accident due to work stress. Mr. Thorne is ready to cover Mr. Vance's medical costs and pay an additional goodwill sum to close this matter right here." I looked at Julian. He was sneaking a peek at his smartwatch, a smirk curling on his lips as he heard his lawyer talk about goodwill money. He thinks money can buy silence. He thinks this trial is just a transaction. But he is wrong. He has no idea who he is standing before. Mr. Sterling, I said, leaning forward over the bench. My voice wasn't loud. It was that dangerous kind of quiet that makes a crowded room hold its collective breath. Do you think this is a negotiation for a parking space? Do you think the dignity of this man, I pointed a finger directly at Elias Vance, is something you can purchase like a software update? Sterling stiffened, adjusting his tie nervously. But Julian? Julian laughed, a short, sharp sound that cut through the silence like a knife. He leaned over and whispered something to his lawyer, loud enough for the court microphones to catch every single syllable. Just double the offer, Robert. Let's get to lunch. I have a reservation at 1. The audacity hung in the air, thick and suffocating. He wasn't just disrespectful, he was bored. He viewed this assault, this man's pain, as a scheduling conflict. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Miss Kincaid, stood up. She didn't have the $1,000 suit or the luxury watch, but she had something better, the truth. Your Honor, she said, her eyes locking onto Julian with a steel gaze. The defense characterizes this as an accident born of stress. We have video evidence that proves otherwise. We moved to play the security footage from the Apex lobby. Sterling tried to object, claiming the video was prejudicial, but I shut him down with a wave of my hand. Play the tape, I ordered. The large screens in the courtroom flickered to life. The footage was high definition, ironically, from the very security system Julian had installed. We saw Elias standing at his post, his posture straight, doing his job. We saw Julian storm in, ignoring the security protocols. Then came the audio. It was crystal clear. I don't have time for this peasant nonsense. Julian's voice boomed from the speakers. On screen, we watched the confrontation escalate. We saw Elias stand his ground, polite but firm. And then we saw the strike. The sound of the solid metal tablet connecting with Elias's skull echoed through the courtroom. It was a sickening thud, followed by the sound of an old man hitting the marble floor. The gallery gasped. A woman in the back row covered her mouth. On the screen, Julian didn't even flinch. He stepped over Elias's legs like he was stepping over a piece of trash on the sidewalk. He swiped the card from the unconscious man's belt, opened the elevator, and checked his hair in the reflection of the doors before they closed. The video ended, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. I looked at Elias. He was weeping silently, his head bowed, reliving the moment he was treated like garbage. Then I looked at Julian. He wasn't watching the screen. He was looking at his cuticles, picking at a hangnail. He hadn't watched a single second of the violence he inflicted. Mr. Thorne, I said. He didn't look up. Mr. Thorne, I roared, my voice shaking the walls. He jumped, finally looking at me with an expression of genuine annoyance. What? He snapped. I've seen it. I was there. Can we move on? Move on? I asked, taking off my glasses slowly. You think we are going to move on from you cracking a man's skull open because you didn't want to wait 10 seconds? He was in my way, Julian said, shrugging as if that explained everything. I'm building the future, Judge. He's just guarding a door. It's simple economics. My time is worth $50,000 an hour. His is worth, what, 15? The courtroom erupted. People were shouting. The bailiff had to call for order. But Julian just sat there, looking around with a confused expression, genuinely unable to understand why everyone was so upset. That was when Miss Kincaid stood up again. She was holding a stack of papers. Your Honor, if the defendant believes his time is the only thing of value here, the people would like to introduce Exhibit B. These are internal emails sent by Mr. Thorne to his executive team 10 minutes after the assault. I nodded. Proceed. Kincaid began to read. Subject, security issue. Message, just had to discipline the gatekeeper downstairs. He got blood on the lobby floor. Have the cleaning crew scrub it before the investors arrive at 2, and fire him. I don't want to see his face when I leave. She lowered the paper. He didn't call an ambulance, Your Honor. He called the janitor. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning, the rustle of a notepad, the heavy breathing of the man whose life had been reduced to a spill on a lobby floor. He called the janitor, I repeated, my voice low. I looked at Julian. He was no longer picking at his nails. He was looking at his lawyer, his jaw tight, not with shame, but with irritation. He was annoyed that his private emails were being read aloud. He was annoyed that he was being judged. Mr. Thorne, I said, you looked at a human being bleeding on the marble, a man who has protected your property for 15 years, and your first instinct wasn't to save him. It was to clean him up. Like he was a spilled coffee, like he was dirt. Julian stood up then. His lawyer tried to grab his arm, to pull him back down, but Julian shook him off. He smoothed his suit jacket, looked me right in the eye, and said the words that sealed his fate. It was a business decision, Judge. I had a delegation from Tokyo arriving at 2 p.m. We were closing a Series C funding round worth $400 million. If they walked in and saw a mess on the floor, the deal collapses. My responsibility is to my shareholders. I protected the asset. That is my job. The gallery gasped. Even his own lawyer put his head in his hands. You protected the asset, I said, taking off my glasses again. I placed them gently on the bench. And Mr. Vance, is he an asset? Or is he a liability in your ledger? He was an obstacle, Julian said coldly. And frankly, he was incompetent. If he had just let me through, none of this would have happened. He brought this on himself by trying to exert authority he didn't have. I turned to Elias. He was shaking. His daughter, sitting behind him, had her hand on his shoulder, tears streaming down her face. Miss Kincaid, I said to the prosecutor, please continue. Kincaid nodded, her face grim. Thank you, Your Honor. The defendant claims he was protecting the asset. But let's look at what happened to Mr. Vance after he was cleaned up. Exhibit C. She projected a document onto the screen. It was a termination notice. While Mr. Vance was in the emergency room receiving 12 stitches to his forehead, Kincaid said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage, he received this notification on his phone. It was an automated termination email from Apex Horizon HR. Reason for termination: gross misconduct and insubordination, effective immediately. She turned to the jury, then to me. He fired him, Your Honor. He assaulted him, left him bleeding, and then fired him before the doctors had even finished sewing him up. And because he was fired for misconduct, Mr. Vance lost his severance. He lost his health insurance. That bill for the emergency room, he had to pay for it out of his savings he was keeping for his retirement. I looked at the document on the screen. It was cold, corporate, and heartless. It was signed digitally by Julian Thorne. Mr. Sterling, I said to the defense attorney, I assume you have a brilliant legal justification for destroying a man's livelihood while he was in the hospital. Sterling stood up slowly. He looked defeated. He knew there was no spinning this. Your Honor, my client maintains that security protocols must be followed. Mr. Vance physically obstructed the CEO. Technically, under company bylaws, that is grounds for termination. Technically? I asked. We are in a court of law, Mr. Sterling, not a board meeting. We deal in justice here, not technicalities. I turned my gaze back to Julian. You stripped him of his job. You stripped him of his insurance. You stripped him of his dignity. And you stand there telling me it was for shareholder value? Julian rolled his eyes. Oh, please. He can get another job. People like him always do. It's not like he was a lead engineer. He's a guard. He stands there. That's his skill set. I did him a favor. Now he can find something he's actually good at. That was it. The last thread of my patience snapped. A favor? I asked, my voice rising. You think you did him a favor? I think I'm being persecuted for being successful. Julian shot back. If I were a truck driver who got in a fight, I'd get a fine and walk away. But because I'm Julian Thorne, because I'm on the cover of Forbes, you want to make an example of me. It's jealousy. Plain and simple. You're jealous of what I've built. I sat back. A strange calm washed over me. It's the calm that comes right before the storm. Jealousy, I repeated. You think I'm jealous. You think the people in this room are jealous. You think Mr. Vance is jealous. I leaned forward. Mr. Vance, please stand up. Elias stood, his legs unsteady. Mr. Vance, I asked gently, how long have you been married? 40 years, Your Honor, Elias whispered. And your children? 2. Both went to college. My son is a teacher. My daughter is a nurse. And your home? Paid off, sir. It took 30 years, but it's ours. I turned to Julian. Mr. Thorne, you are 29. You have billions. You have fame. Tell me, who is waiting for you at home? Julian blinked. I, I have staff. No wife, no children. I don't have time for distractions. I see, I said. Mr. Vance has built a life. You have built a portfolio. You think you are the valuable one in this room because of your net worth. But looking at the two of you, I see one man who is rich in everything that matters, and one man who is so poor. All he has is money. Julian's face turned red. Don't lecture me, old man. Just tell me the fine so I can write the check. A fine? I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Oh, Mr. Thorne, we are way past fines. The air in the courtroom shifted. It wasn't just tense anymore, it was heavy, the kind of heavy that happens right before a building collapses. Julian's smirk faltered for the first time. He looked at me, then at his lawyer, and saw the panic in Sterling's eyes. Mr. Sterling, I said, my voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register. Your client seems to be under the impression that the penal code has a price list. Perhaps you should explain to him the difference between a civil settlement and a criminal felony. Sterling stood up, wiping sweat from his forehead. Your Honor, we understand the gravity of the situation. Mr. Thorne is under immense pressure. The IPO launch next week. The stress. We are asking for leniency. We propose probation, 2 years. And Mr. Thorne will double the donation to the Police Benevolent Fund. $1 million. He said $1 million like it was a magic spell, like it was the open sesame to freedom. $1 million, I repeated. To the police fund. How noble. And what about Mr. Vance? Does that $1 million fix the scar on his forehead? Does it erase the memory of being stepped over like roadkill? We will compensate Mr. Vance separately, Sterling rushed to add. A generous package. Full medical coverage. Lost wages. I don't want his money. The voice came from the plaintiff's table. Elias Vance was standing again. He was trembling, but his voice was clear. I don't want a penny from him. I want him to know what he did. I want him to understand that I am a human being. Julian scoffed, loudly. Oh, save the drama. Everyone has a price. Just name yours so we can end this charade. That was the moment the gavel came down. Bang! That is enough, I shouted. Mr. Thorne, you have interrupted these proceedings, insulted the victim, and mocked this court. One more word out of you, and I will have you gagged. Do you understand? Julian slumped back, rolling his eyes, muttering something about wasting time. I turned my attention back to the prosecutor. Miss Kincaid, the charge is aggravated assault, correct? Yes, Your Honor, Kincaid replied. Assault with a deadly weapon. Sterling jumped up. Objection. A tablet is not a deadly weapon. It is a solid block of aluminum and glass, I countered, swung with sufficient force to fracture a skull. If Mr. Thorne had used a brick, would you object? If he had used a hammer, the instrument is irrelevant. The intent and the damage are what matter, and the damage here is severe. I picked up the medical report. A 2-inch laceration, a concussion, and let's not forget the psychological trauma. Mr. Vance has been unable to sleep. He has anxiety attacks when he hears loud noises. And you, Mr. Thorne, you fired him for it. I leaned over the bench, staring directly into Julian's soul. You see, this is what bothers me. You didn't just hurt him physically. You tried to erase him. You fired him to scrub a stain from your lobby. You treated a man's life like a line of bad code that needed to be deleted. It's corporate policy, Julian muttered, unable to help himself. Zero tolerance for confrontation. Zero tolerance, I repeated. I like that phrase. Let's apply it here. This court has zero tolerance for bullies who think they are gods. I opened the sentencing guidelines book. The pages rustled loudly in the silent room. For aggravated assault causing bodily injury, the state guidelines suggest a sentence ranging from probation to 5 years in state prison. At the word prison, Julian finally froze. He looked at Sterling. Prison? Robert, you said probation. You said community service. It said, I'm trying, Julian, Sterling whispered, his face pale. I can't go to prison, Julian said, his voice rising in pitch. I have a company to run. I have shareholders. Do you know what happens to the stock price if I go to jail? Thousands of people will lose money. My employees, their jobs depend on me. Sending me to prison it's economic suicide for the city. He was playing the too big to fail card. He was using his own employees as human shields. So now you care about your employees? I asked. The same employees you fire while they are in the emergency room? You want to talk about economic impact? Let's talk about the impact on Mr. Vance's family when you cut off his salary. Let's talk about the impact on society when we tell billionaires they can beat people up as long as their stock price is high. I closed the book. Mr. Thorne, you are used to controlling everything. You control the market. You control your board. You control the narrative. But you are in my house now. And in my house, the only currency that matters is accountability. Miss Kincaid, I said, does the prosecution have a sentencing recommendation? Kincaid stood tall. Your Honor, given the defendant's complete lack of remorse, his attempts to buy his way out of justice, and the cruelty of his actions post-assault, the people recommend the maximum sentence. 5 years. 5 years? Julian screamed. He jumped out of his chair. Are you insane? For hitting a guard? He's fine. Look at him. He's standing right there. Sit down, the bailiff barked, stepping forward. No, Julian yelled. This is a kangaroo court. I am Julian Thorne. I built Apex Horizon. You can't touch me. I watched him unravel. The cool board CEO was gone. In his place was a frightened, angry child who had never been told no in his life. Mr. Thorne, I said quietly, you just proved exactly why you need to be exactly where I am going to send you. Sit down, the bailiff barked, placing a heavy hand on Julian's shoulder. For a second, I thought Julian was going to shove him too. He looked at the officer's badge, then at the gun on his hip, and slowly, resentfully, sank back into his leather chair. He adjusted his suit jacket, muttering something about lawsuits under his breath. Mr. Thorne, I said, my voice cutting through the tension like a razor blade. You just screamed that you are too big to fail. You claimed you are untouchable because you employ people. Let me tell you something about the law. It does not care about your stock price. It does not care about your IPO. It cares about the fact that you assaulted a 62-year-old man and left him bleeding on the floor because he inconvenienced you for 10 seconds. I picked up the remote for the video screen and paused the footage on a specific frame. It was the moment Julian stepped over Elias's body. Look at this, I commanded. Look at it. Julian refused to look. He stared straight ahead at the court seal on the wall. You see a peasant, I continued, my voice rising. You see an obstacle. Do you know what I see? I see a man who has shown up to work every day for 15 years. A man who knows the names of everyone in that building. A man who, according to his employment file, which I requested this morning, once saved a young intern from harassment in the parking garage. A man who brings donuts for the night shift janitors out of his own pocket. I slammed the file shut. Elias Vance is a protector. You are a predator. I create value, Julian snapped, unable to keep his mouth shut. I built a platform that connects millions of people. What has he built? A pension he can't even live on? The cruelty of his words made the gallery gasp. Even Sterling, his own lawyer, looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. He whispered frantically to Julian, "Stop talking. For the love of God, stop talking." "No, let him speak," I said, leaning back. "Let the record show exactly who Julian Thorne is. Because, Mr. Sterling, your defense was that this was a moment of stress. But this," I gestured to Julian, "this is not stress. This is character. This is a man who believes that because he has $1 billion, the rest of us are just NPCs in his video game." I turned to Elias. "Mr. Vance, I have a question for you." Elias looked up, his eyes red. "Yes, Your Honor." "When you were lying on the floor, what was the first thing you thought of?" Elias swallowed hard. I thought about my wife, sir. She has arthritis. I help her with the stairs every evening. My first thought was, if I can't walk, who is going to help Mary?" The room went silent. "He thought about his wife," I said softly. "And you, Mr. Thorne? What was your first thought?" "Oh, that's right. We have the email. Your first thought was the carpet. Julian finally looked uncomfortable. He shifted in his seat, loosening his tie. I I didn't know he was hurt that bad. It looked like a scratch. A scratch? I picked up the medical photos. This is a skull fracture. This is a concussion. And you fired him while he was getting stitched up. That wasn't business, Mr. Thorne. That was malice. You wanted to hurt him. You wanted to punish him for daring to tell you no. I looked at the prosecutor. Miss Kincaid, you recommended 5 years. I am looking at the sentencing guidelines here. Aggravated assault, intentional infliction of emotional distress. And let's not forget the attempt to cover it up by deleting security logs. Oh, yes, we saw that in the IT report too. Julian's eyes went wide. I didn't delete them. My CTO did. At your instruction, I corrected him, which makes you guilty of conspiracy to destroy evidence. I took a deep breath. Mr. Thorne, you have spent your entire life buying your way out of trouble. You bought your way into college. You bought your competitors. You tried to buy Mr. Vance. And now, you think you can buy me with a donation to the police fund. I stood up. The law is not for sale today. Mr. Sterling, do you have any final words before I pass sentence? And I warn you, if you mention his potential or his future one more time, I will hold you in contempt. Sterling stood up, his hands shaking. He looked at Julian, then at me. Your Honor, my client he is a flawed man. He is arrogant. He is disconnected. But prison will destroy him. He will not survive in there. We beg the court for mercy. House arrest, ankle monitor, anything but state prison. Mercy, I repeated. Mr. Vance begged for mercy when he asked to keep his job. Did he get it? No, Your Honor, Sterling whispered. Then why should Mr. Thorne get what he refused to give? I looked at Julian. For the first time, the arrogance was gone. In its place was pure, unadulterated fear. He realized the checkbook wasn't going to work. He realized the lawyer wasn't going to work. Please, Julian whispered. It was the first time he had said that word in years. I can change. I can fix this. You had your chance to fix it, I said. When he was on the floor. When he was in the hospital. When you walked into this courtroom today. You didn't want to fix it. You wanted to win. I raised the gavel. Mr. Thorne, stand up, I ordered. Julian stood on legs that looked like jelly. He gripped the defense table so hard his knuckles turned white. He looked at me, then at the gallery, then at the exit sign, calculating a way out that didn't exist. You have spent this entire trial talking about value, I began, my voice echoing in the silent room. You value your time at $50,000 an hour. You value your company in the billions. You value your reputation enough to fire a bleeding man to protect it. But you have failed to understand the most basic economic principle of a civilized society. The cost of human dignity is infinite. I opened the file. On the charge of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, finding that you acted with malice and extreme indifference to human life, I sentence you to the maximum penalty allowed by law, 5 years in the state penitentiary. Julian let out a sound that was half gasp, half sob. 5 years? He stammered. Judge, please, I'll pay. I'll give him 5 million, 10 million. I am not finished. I slammed the gavel down. Bang. On the charge of conspiracy to tamper with evidence regarding the deletion of the security logs, I am sentencing you to an additional 2 years to be served consecutively. That is a total of 7 years in state custody. You will not be eligible for parole for at least 4 years. 7 years? Julian screamed. His face went purple. I'll be 36 when I get out. The tech world moves fast. I'll be obsolete. You're destroying my life over a security guard. You destroyed his life over a door, I shouted back. And unlike you, Mr. Vance didn't have a golden parachute. He had a termination letter. I leaned forward. And since you are so fond of financial transactions, let's talk about restitution. You offered $1 million to the police fund to make this go away. I am rejecting that donation. I turned to the clerk. Enter a judgment of restitution in favor of Elias Vance. Mr. Thorne, you calculated that Mr. Vance's time was worth $15 an hour. You were wrong. His time, his pain, and the humiliation you caused him are worth far more. You are hereby ordered to pay Mr. Vance a lump sum equivalent to 20 years of his salary, plus damages for pain and suffering. The total judgment is $2.5 million. And Mr. Thorne, this is personal liability. It does not come from your company insurance. It comes from your personal account. Today, Julian looked like he had been punched in the gut. He slumped against his lawyer. Robert, do something. Appeal. Call the governor. Call my dad. Sterling shook his head, pulling away from him. It's over, Julian. You tampered with evidence. There is no appeal for that. Bailiff, I said, take Mr. Thorne into custody. 2 officers moved in. They didn't approach him like a CEO. They approached him like a convict. Turn around, the bailiff ordered. Don't touch me, Julian shrieked, backing away. Do you know how much tax I pay? I pay your salary. I own this city. The bailiff didn't argue. He spun Julian around and slammed him against the table gently enough not to bruise, but hard enough to show who was in charge. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut, click, 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 was the loudest sound in the room. Ow, that's tight. You're hurting my wrists, Julian whined. Mr. Vance had a broken wrist for 3 weeks because of you, I noted coldly. I think you can handle a little discomfort for the walk to the van. As they began to drag him out, Julian looked back at Elias. For a second, I thought he might apologize. I thought maybe, just maybe, the reality of 7 years in a cell had humbled him, but I was wrong. Privilege is a disease that eats the soul, and Julian was terminal. You're nothing, Julian spat at Elias, spittle flying from his mouth. You're still a nobody. I'll be back. And when I get out, I'll buy this whole courthouse and turn it into a parking lot. Elias stood up then. He didn't yell. He didn't get angry. He just looked at the young man in the $5,000 suit who was now property of the state. Mr. Thorne, Elias said, his voice steady, you can buy the building, but you can't buy the way people look at you. When I walk down the street, people wave. When you walk down the street, people will only see a number. The officers hauled Julian out. His screams of, "Do you know who I am?" fading down the hallway until the heavy oak doors slammed shut. Silence returned to the courtroom, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was light. It was the feeling of balance being restored. Mr. Vance, I said. Elias looked at me. He looked shocked, like he couldn't believe the nightmare was over. I am sorry, I said. I am sorry, I said again, looking down at Elias from the bench. I am sorry that you had to stand there and listen to a man debate the value of your life like it was a stock option. No one should have to justify their existence to a bully. Elias smiled. It was a tired smile, but it reached his eyes for the first time that day. Your Honor, he said softly, I have been invisible for 15 years. People look through security guards like we are made of glass. Today you saw me. That is enough. He gathered his things slowly, his movements still stiff from the injuries. His daughter took his arm, supporting him. As they turned to walk down the center aisle, the strangest thing happened. The people in the gallery, reporters, law students, random citizens who had wandered in, they stood up. They didn't clap. This wasn't a movie. They just stood. Silent respect, acknowledging the dignity of a man who had refused to be broken. Elias walked out with his head high. He was no longer the victim. He was the man who took down a giant. I went back to my chambers and poured a glass of water. My hand was shaking slightly. You never get used to it, the sheer weight of passing judgment on another human being's life. 7 years. I had just taken 7 years of a young man's life. But then I remembered the termination email. I remembered the blood on the floor, and my hand stopped shaking. But the story didn't end when the gavel banged. In fact, for Julian Thorne, the nightmare was just beginning. You see, Julian thought prison would be like the movies he'd seen. He thought he would go to a white-collar resort with tennis courts and email access. He thought his expensive lawyers would have him out on appeal in a week. He was wrong. Because I had sentenced him for violent assault with a weapon, he was not eligible for minimum security. He was processed into the state correctional facility at 4 p.m. that afternoon. I learned later from the warden what happened during intake. It is a story of poetic justice that you almost have to see to believe. When Julian arrived, he was still wearing his $10,000 Tom Ford suit. He demanded to see the manager. He actually used that word. He told the intake officer, a woman named Sergeant Miller, that he had dietary restrictions and needed a gluten-free menu. Sergeant Miller didn't argue. She just handed him a plastic bag. "Put the suit in the bag, inmate," she said. "This is silk," Julian protested, clutching his lapels. "It can't be folded. It needs a hanger." "In the bag," Miller repeated, her voice flat, "or we cut it off." Julian stripped. He stood there, shivering in the cold intake room, stripped of his armor. No suit, no watch, no phone, no status, just a pale, terrified young man. They shaved his head, standard procedure for hygiene at state. The stylist cut hair, the product of expensive salons, fell to the dirty linoleum floor in clumps. When he looked in the mirror, Julian Thorne didn't see a CEO anymore. He saw inmate number 992, CV. He was placed in a cell block with a car thief and an armed robber. That first night, according to the logs, Julian didn't sleep. He sat on the edge of his metal bunk, staring at the concrete wall. He asked the guard for his tablet. He said he needed to check his email, that the market is opening soon. The guard laughed. "The only tablet you're going to see in here, Thorne, is the one you used to crack that old man's head open, and I don't think they let you keep evidence." Meanwhile, outside the prison walls, the economic suicide that Julian had predicted was happening, but not in the way he thought. At 5 p.m., the board of directors of Apex Horizon held an emergency meeting. They didn't debate how to save Julian. They debated how fast they could distance themselves from him. By 6 p.m., a press release went out. Julian Thorne has been removed as CEO, effective immediately. Apex Horizon condemns violence in all forms and stands with the victims of workplace abuse. The next morning, the stock market opened. Julian had screamed in my courtroom that his imprisonment would crash the stock. He was certain he was the company. But when the opening bell rang, the stock went up. It went up 4%. The market loved that the unstable, violent liability was gone. The investors breathed a sigh of relief. The company was worth more without him. That was the final blow. It wasn't the prison cell. It wasn't the bad food. It was the realization that he was not essential. He was replaceable, just like he said Elias was. 2 weeks later, the judgment was executed. The $2.5 million was transferred from Julian Thorne's frozen assets directly to Elias Vance. I heard from Elias's daughter about what happened next. You might expect a man who just received millions to go out and buy a sports car or a mansion. That's what Julian would have done. But Elias, the first thing he did was pay off every single medical bill. Then he paid off his daughter's student loans in full. He set up a college fund for his grandson. And finally, he took his wife, Mary, to a specialist for her arthritis, the best doctor in the state, one he could never afford before. He didn't quit working entirely, though. He retired from security, yes, but he started volunteering at the local community center, teaching young men how to prepare for job interviews. He bought suits for them. He taught them how to tie ties. He taught them that dignity isn't about the job you do, but how you do it. And Julian? I received a report from the Department of Corrections yesterday. It seems inmate 992, CV, has been assigned a job. The prison system believes in rehabilitation through labor. Julian Thorne, the man who once fired a janitor for cleaning up his mess too slowly, has been assigned to the sanitation detail. Every morning at 5 a.m., the former billionaire wakes up, puts on a gray jumpsuit, and picks up a mop. He scrubs the floors of the cell block. He cleans the showers. He wipes down the tables in the cafeteria. He is learning, scrub by scrub, the value of the work he once despised. He is learning that the floor doesn't clean itself. He is learning that the people who clean up after us are not invisible, they are essential. The warden told me something interesting. He said that for the first week, Julian refused to work. He threw tantrums. He threatened to sue the prison. He screamed, "I am a creator. I am an innovator." But hunger and isolation have a way of clarifying things. By the second week, he picked up the mop. By the third week, he was doing it without complaint. And yesterday, when a new inmate spilled his tray in the mess hall, Julian didn't step over it. He didn't call someone else to clean it up. He got his bucket, got down on his knees, and wiped it up himself. Maybe there is hope for him yet. Maybe in 7 years, when he walks out of those gates with nothing but a bus ticket and a hard lesson, He will finally be a man worth knowing. As for me, I'm still here. I'm still sitting on this bench. And I will stay here as long as there are people who think their money makes them better than the rest of us. Let this case be a reminder to everyone watching. You can drive a Mercedes. You can wear a Tom Ford suit. You can have $1 billion in the bank. But in my courtroom, you are just a citizen. And if you hurt the people you think are beneath you, I will bring you down to their level so fast your head will spin. Dignity is not for sale. Justice is not a luxury item. And no one, absolutely no one, is too big to fall. If you enjoyed this story of justice served, please hit that like button and share this video. Let's remind the world that character counts for more than currency. I am Judge Boyd. Court is adjourned.